How to really navigate a narcissistic workplace and or leader didn't click for me until I addressed the narcissistic family member I had in my life and actually totally cut them off. And I've been researching unwritten rules of work and navigating workplace bullying for 10 years, and I'm not an academic. I have a Ph.D. I've worked in academia, and sometimes I collaborate, but I've been in applied corporate and government spaces for 10 years. I've lived it. I've walked employees and students and clients through it, and it still didn't click for me until my therapist called out the amount of shit I took every time I went home. Every time I answered a text message that was beyond abusive, every time I let them hang up the phone on me, every time I took the blame for their behavior. And I'd been in therapy for at least 6 years. I just hadn't had a therapist that knew enough about these dynamics, or that I'd brought it up enough in therapy to call that out. And so what you have in your personal life, what is normalized abuse in some way, absolutely influences the work environments that attract you, the behavior you put up with, and what you see as normal. That's the whole thing behind unwritten rules of work. I talk all the time on here about how what you see as normal is unwritten rules for someone else. And where organizations that require people working well together are impacted is when this assumption is never addressed, because it's inherent that there's always going to be something unwritten. And if there are no avenues to work through this, there's going to be conflict. So I've talked about how this happens for things that aren't necessarily bad, but there are also things that happen that are normalized in your background that shouldn't be normalized anywhere, but they're going to be. And I say that you have to process this and work on this not in a victim blaming way. It's not my fault that this other person was a narcissist and they were older than me, and I had never known life without them. That's not my fault, but I'm the only one who has the responsibility to work through it, because narcissists aren't going to take it. And I'm the only one who has the ability to fix it. And once I started setting those boundaries with this person, which unfortunately ended up with having to completely disengage, because a true narcissist is not capable of taking ownership for anything. It is a disorder. They call it narcissistic personality disorder for a reason. It's very sad. But once I understood those patterns and saw and learned how to navigate them, then my work life changed. Because I didn't know it, but I was fawning. I was seeking this person's approval. I was always taking the higher ground. I was always being the one to fix things, kill them with kindness, all of that stuff that you're told, especially when it's someone who you share blood with and who is older than you. And of course, there's a different dynamic at work. You're not related to them. They can be your peer. They could be a supervisor, different levels of power, different things to lose. So losing a family member is no small potatoes, but I'm talking about losing, your livelihood, which has different risks. But there is also only 2% of the population is a bona fide narcissist. The problem is a lot of organizations reward narcissistic traits. So you very likely have a boss who isn't a narcissist, but they have been conditioned and sometimes explicitly trained and given books like the 48 Laws of Power, telling them that this is how they behave and hold power. And when you learn how to fight back and to not play into those traps, you may realize you still have to leave and cut off the relationship entirely. But this is so conditioned across corporate America and a lot of other white collar spaces like government and nonprofits and academia as well, that you're likely going to at least run into these traits over and over again. So learning how to navigate them is very critical, and how to not fall into their traps, and how to spot the red flags early. Because while there's different things to lose, there's also different consequences for their behavior. When I cut off this family member, it was awkward with my whole family. I didn't want to go home. I did, because my brothers have adorable children who need to know their auntie. But it was uncomfortable. But keep in mind, in the workplace, a narcissistic person, they may have power over you in that instance, and that's a risk. Yet they also risk their own livelihood. And there are avenues you can take, both legally and in using their own games against them to target their ego, which is what they care about the most, to have an impact. Because they also don't have the you're a blood relative thing working for them to feel like they can get away with behavior either in the same way. So anyway, I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but absolutely agree with your comment. I pulled this up when I hit record because we talk about this all the time in my Unwritten Rules school. We do group coaching once a week, and I have a course in here on navigating workplace bullying. There were several people on the call last night when we did the live group coaching. We were talking about how to navigate this, moving back and working through these power traps. This can be a lot for a group coaching call where we spend an hour. So depending on how many people are on the call, if it's only a handful, you can get some pretty individualized attention. If it's a lot, it's harder. One-on-one coaching is always the better route for individualized help. It is pricier. It's not as expensive as years of therapy, though, and losing your job. So the links for that are in my bio, and you can learn more about my coaching program, which we can customize to you on my website, drkarlschmidt.com/coaching.